Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Objectivist Girl Live. Today we are talking about virtues. There are several in objectivist ethics, and we're going to talk about possibly adding some. So today I've got Marsha Enright with me, and she is absolutely fabulous and an awesome objectivist. And how are you doing today, Marsha?
Good, good. I'm very happy to be here too.
Awesome.
And it's a really interesting topic.
Mm-hmm. I thought you would be perfect for this topic after attending many of your Socratic seminars at the Atlas Summit.
No, thank you.
Yeah. So Marsha actually does Socratic seminars every year at the Atlas Summit. So if you guys like what you hear today, you should definitely come out to the Atlas Summit next year. I can help you students get free scholarships. So anyway, Marsha, I wanted to go ahead and talk about the virtues that already exist in objectivist ethics and start there. So the first one is rationality, and that's basically means using reason and rejecting emotion to identify reality. And why do you think that this is important in objectivist ethics? Because I think this is the most important thing.
It's the central virtue because reason, the way that man is his basic tool of survival. And if the purpose of ethics is to know what you should do and what values you should pursue in order to live a well-lived life and a happy life, then you want to use your basic means of survival. And human beings, unlike other animals, we're weak. We don't have claws. We don't have sharp teeth. But what we do have is the ability to reason, and that allows us to basically dominate all the other animals on Earth because of that. And reason allows us to, instead of just adapt to reality, we can transform it in order to serve our own needs. So this is why it's the central value, and reason is the central value, and rationality is the central virtue.
Wow, that's really cool. I've never thought about it that way, as rationality being like our claws or our teeth. That help us survive. That's really good. I love that comparison. So the next one is honesty, and that's the refusal to fake reality. And I view honesty as I'm very strict on my honesty, and that is if I were to meet a religious person, I would never state that I am religious just to soften the conversation, because I believe in always being purely honest. What do you think?
Let's talk about honesty for a minute, but I think we should back up after that to two other values and virtues that are actually more fundamental.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm up for that.
Honesty is very important because it's the virtue of always recognizing what the actual facts are. Now, in any particular conversation, however, you have to assess what your purpose is in the conversation. So it doesn't mean that you're going to bring up certain ideas in every conversation, because, for example, if you're with a clerk at a store and you're trying to have a transaction to buy something, you're not going to, even if they mention that they're religious, you might not engage with them in a conversation because your purpose is not to do that, but to finish the transaction. So I think that keeping that in mind, that you always have purpose in what you're doing. If you're trying to live your life well, you're always considering what is your purpose and how are you using your time. So that's very important in deciding when to engage in conversations and when not. It doesn't mean that you're going to lie about what your ideas are. Not that at all. But it doesn't mean they're always going to bring them up either.
Interesting. So would you say purpose is part of productivity, or is it its own separate value?
It's one of the major values in life, because in order to, if your ultimate value is your life well lived, then you have to use your reason in order to set your goals and attain your values, and that's what being purposeful is about. So yeah, it's always something that you have to consider when you do any action.
Interesting. So I think we're already adding to her list of these 7 virtues. I think purpose is a great one. She should have that on this list.
Well, she has it as her one of her 3 main values in life. Reason, purpose, and self-esteem.
Oh, very cool. Those are not the ones. Those are not the ones on my list. I have no idea.
Right. Well, because they're values, and virtues are the actions that you take to achieve your values.
Right, 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 right.
So rationality is the action you take when you're being reasonable, when you're using reason. Um, and productiveness, for example, and other virtues are things that you do in order to be purposeful. And pride, for example, and acting for your own best interest is acting in accordance with the value of self-esteem.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, so basically what you're saying is that there are three values and these virtues encompass those or help you attain those values. That's
Right.
okay. I like that. So the
So if we
next Oh, go
back up
ahead.
to, you said honesty, but there's two other very important virtues that are kind of uh, more essential than some of the other ones, and that's productiveness and pride. And these three things, rationality, productiveness, and pride, reflect the three major values: reason, purpose, and self-esteem. So productiveness, reason rationality is the essential virtue, because without it you can't implement any of the other ones. Productiveness is your actions that you take in order to sustain your own life, in order to transform the world in a way that's appropriate for your needs, that fulfills your own needs. And then pride is the implementation of self-esteem, where you're acting for your own sake and for your highest good. So.
Okay. Yeah, so I like pride a lot, mainly because I think our society lacks a lot of self-esteem, and I think that's actually that or rationality has got to be the biggest issues in our society today.
Mm-hmm.
I think productiveness is an issue, but honestly, I think I see pride and rationality as our biggest issues.
You mean that more people recognize productiveness as a virtue than they do
Yes.
reason or pride? Mm-hmm.
Yes, and they embody it. Our
Mm-hmm.
society understands, some of our society, most of our society understands goals and working to achieve them, but a lot of people don't understand that these virtues are the only way to truly be able to get something really valuable out of your existence.
Mm-hmm.
And out of your work, out of your personal life, everything. And I guess that's why I made that episode, How to Achieve All Your Dreams Through Objectivism. But yeah, so anyway, we've also got a few other values: integrity, independence, and justice. Which one do you want to talk about next?
Why don't we talk about integrity?
Okay, I love integrity. Yeah.
How do you understand it?
So basically, integrity is always holding true to your values no matter what, which is pretty much like, say I want to go out and lose weight and do all of that, and I just decide that I really want ice cream. But ice cream isn't holding true to my ultimate value, which is working out. And if losing weight isn't really my ultimate value, then why am I pursuing it in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
So I need to understand what my values are and pursue them with integrity.
Mm-hmm. So it's a kind of consistency.
Right.
That what you're doing, that you know what your values are, and you always think about how to make them be related to each other, integrated with each other.
Absolutely. It's about being able to understand your hierarchy of values and keeping it really clear. That's what I talk to my viewers about all the time, is about knowing exactly what your highest value is and where all of your values stand, and being able to make decisions with a full conscious awareness of exactly where those values lie and what you're compromising to make those decisions.
And how they're related to each other. How all your values are related to each other, so that none of them contradict each other.
Right. It was in Atlas Shrugged, if you see a contradiction, you should check your premises. Because contradictions don't exist.
Right.
I'm rereading it. It's absolutely fabulous. It's so much better the second time, I decided. So the other one I like is independence, and I think that really speaks to our generation, because I think our generation, every generation, gets more interested in their own independence as they grow older. And independence in objectivist ethics means being first-handed or refusing to leave one's thinking to others. And I see this as not only just not letting your parents make your decisions for you at a certain age, but also a lot of people don't realize that they have become dependent on things like religion or government to make their decisions for them. And I don't think that that's productive. What do you think?
No, it's a very difficult virtue to follow because, I often say to people, if we were cats, independence would not be a virtue.
That's true. That's
but we're highly social animals, and so that's one of the reasons why it's very difficult to be independent. And it's actually often valuable that we are tuned into each other. For example, a practical example is you're driving down the highway, and all of a sudden everything slows down, and you're wondering what's going on. Well, it turns out that you realize something must be going on, and everybody's looking at the accident at the other side of the street. And why is that? Because human beings know that if other human beings are looking at things, it's probably something important to look at. So that's just a little example of ways in which we get information from other human beings. But it's also, so we have this tendency to be very tuned in. There's scientists have discovered these neurons in our brains called mirror neurons that allow you to feel what another person is feeling, like you empathize. It's one of the ways that you empathize with other people. So there's many things about us that make us very tuned into other people. And that makes it hard to stick. It's almost like our social nature is in some respects in conflict to our rational nature, which requires that we make up our own minds about things. So that's why independence is such an important virtue, because you can't live through somebody else's mind. You have to be very aware that you can learn things from other people. You might gain valuable knowledge by what somebody else is looking at, but in the end, you have to figure out yourself if what you've learned is an important fact and how to use it. So.
See, I think what you just said is a great argument against those who say that objectivism is anti-community. I would say that based on those mirror neurons and the way that we're built to pursue a society together, there's no way for us to actually become antisocial or become or ostracize ourselves because of the fact that we're naturally inclined to not do so. So therefore, we should focus on becoming independent and let us naturally pursue the right amount of social interaction because we've already made the decisions of independence.
Well, that's interesting you say the right amount because, Rand said that her ethics was an Aristotelian ethic. And one of the things that's very important in Aristotle's ethics is the application of virtue, which means that you do it in the right way, at the right place, and in the right time. It's good to know the abstract principles, but then in order to actually be virtuous, you have to figure out how to implement those principles in your particular life. So that's very, very important. And independence is one of those where you have to know when it's important to really stick to your guns about something and when it's not important. So
agreed. So I'm going to move on to justice. Yeah, justice is our last one, and then we'll discuss the article that you sent because it's very interesting. So justice is the principle of applying reason to the actions of other men or giving other people what they deserve. So I think that people confuse justice in our society. They think that justice is that it's like retribution, and I don't see it that way. I see it as mutually beneficial exchange, benevolence, other characteristics of this nature. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think justice is an expression of what Rand called the traitor principle, that you trade value for value, and in this respect, you're giving people what they deserved on a spiritual level, or it might be material too. I mean, if, for example, you were in an emergency and you had to take somebody's car in order to go to the hospital, then you need to give them some kind of compensation for that. So that would only be just.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, justice is a very important. It's probably the most social of the virtues in her list.
Agreed.
And very important. But it also means you have to do justice to yourself. You should make sure it's part and parcel of making sure that you live according to what you need and what you've earned also.
Absolutely. Now, would you say that one of these virtues could really exist without the rest of them? Because honestly, I understand that there's a hierarchy of these virtues, but without one, I think all of the virtues break down. Like, without the ability to understand justice, how can you possibly live a rational life because you're unable to provide a mutually beneficial exchange with anyone?
Yeah, I guess I think of it as the application of reason to your life requires that you use all these virtues, that you act according to all these virtues. But the thing, that I was speaking to you about was I'm not sure this list is complete. I mean,
right.
Certainly David Kelly did, and he added a virtue of benevolence to it. He made a long argument for it. But there's perhaps other virtues that needed to be added because Rand's text, The Objectivist Ethics, and her essays related to ethics are very, very short, and they don't have a lot of detail about how do you actually live your life. I mean, where she has the detail is, and I always think about this when people try to read her essays without having reference to her novels. Whenever she writes about anything in her essays, it's always with the novels as a backdrop. So if you're going to understand her ethics, you have to understand that as implemented by her characters. And even there, it's sometimes confusing because some of her characters are portrayed as kind of extremes for dramatic purposes, like Dominique or Rourke.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I often think about the opening scene of The Fountainhead, where he's supposed to be walking through the town, and he was so unaware of other people, so unconcerned with other people, he could be walking through the town naked. Now, how many people would really be comfortable with that, right? So he's obviously got a kind of extreme maybe lack of mirror neurons or something. I don't know. Like he's not human. And I take that back. I mean, since in the end, his development during The Fountainhead is to start to understand other people a lot more. So he does develop more understanding and sympathy, and he has a kind of natural sympathy also. Yeah.
Agreed. I think she makes her characters extreme on purpose to represent the virtues in a very spotlighted way. So I don't think she ever expected us to be exactly like her characters. That would be a little messed up in Rourke's case. Or Dominique's.
And that's an example of how, in order to apply the virtues, you have to do it in the right place, in the right time, with the right amount. So
right, agreed.
That's the difficulty. But my point in bringing up the novels was that you can't really understand her abstract ideas without reference to the novels as examples of what she means about how you should act. So.
Exactly. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the PDF that you sent me. This is very interesting. I've never actually looked at a chart full of the virtues of each of these different philosophies. And so we've got classical, Aristotelian, Catholic, Benjamin Franklin's, Ayn Rand's, some that people will recognize, others that people won't. But I found it interesting that Aristotle has so many more virtues than Ayn Rand. That stood out to me because she loved him.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why she decided to just talk about 7, and she doesn't say anywhere in the Objectivist Ethics that it's this 7 and only this 7. Now, I know that some objectivists argue that it is only this 7. I've had a conversation with Tara Smith where I was asking her about the virtue of courage, and she said, oh, well, she thought it was a sub-virtue of integrity. And I'm not sure about that, because I think that it takes a quality that you don't necessarily need when you're trying to have integrity, when you're trying to keep true to your values. I think courage requires a kind of facing down the emotion of fear in the face, in order to maintain your values, and that's not something that's necessarily required in all cases when you in the pursuit of integrity. I mean, sometimes it is, but not always.
Yeah, I actually agree with you on the courage, mainly because I've been rereading Atlas Shrugged, and right after we talked about doing this episode, I ran into this quote in the book, and it says, Dagny asks, what is morality? And I'm sorry, I just lost his name. Francisco says, judgment to distinguish right and wrong, vision to see the truth, courage to act upon it, dedication to what is good, integrity to stand up by the good, of the good at any price. No, by the good at any price. Yes.
Oh,
So
interesting. So there she shows she has courage as a separate item than integrity.
Right. She does.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting find. Yeah, I just go from my own experience that it's one thing to, be very clear about your values and make sure that they're integrated with each other and that they're all a part of your ultimate purpose. But it's another thing to face a very dangerous situation and keep acting in the right way in order to pursue your values in the face of that danger, because that kind of emotion fear is something that really can shut down reason. So it takes a special effort in order to continue using your reason and keep cool and calm in the face of danger.
Absolutely.
So that's what you think that about courage. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And I also wonder too about perseverance.
Ooh, yes.
Perseverance seems to me to be a very important virtue to have, because you can't really, Rand says that all of your ethics, that all of your actions are in the context of your whole life, that you should always be thinking in terms of your whole life and achieving the goals of your whole life. And in order to do that, you have to have perseverance. And she doesn't list it on here as a virtue. I mean, you could, say, okay, it's a sub-virtue of integrity or whatever. But I think it would probably be a sub-virtue of integrity if you wanted to call it a sub-virtue. But it seems to me that it requires a special effort of will in order to maintain your perseverance. And in fact, there's I don't know if you remember what one of the speakers at the Objectivist Atlas Society conference last year, Ray Rad, is a psychiatrist who's very interested in the experimental basis of things like perseverance.
Interesting. See, the one that came to mind when I started thinking about our discussion, I started thinking, what if I could add any virtue to objectivism? What would it be? And for me, it was resilience. I think that is greatly lacking in her material and her virtues. Because honestly, if you don't have resilience, you can't get up after the worst happens to you. I mean, what if all of your values are destroyed one day? Can you get up and go at it again? And I think that that's definitely a virtue.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it goes hand in hand with perseverance. You can't have perseverance if you don't have resilience. Absolutely. And interestingly, there's this movement these days of what's called positive psychology, the study of people who function well and are happy and successful and what are their characteristics. And resilience and perseverance are both very important characteristics. Interestingly, there's a psychologist named Martin Seligman who's one of the lead researchers behind this. And he said that after he did all this research on people who were very happy and successful and productive, he realized that the ethic that they lived by reflected Aristotelian ethics.
Wow. That's wow. This just proves my claim over and over again that living by objectivist principles honestly makes people happy. And I think being an open objectivist makes them even happier because they understand the virtue of benevolence. And I think without that benevolence, you don't understand that you don't have to close off to everybody and just, it's like me versus them. Benevolence makes it very, why don't we work together and see if maybe you could have value to me? Maybe, because, benevolence kind of sets aside this idea that everybody has value unless they've proven to you otherwise. And it puts everybody on that blank slate, and it's great. And I think that she really proves that in Emergency of Ethics, that she really, really, really believes. Ethics of Emergencies, I'm sorry, that she really believes that. But the one I was really interested in, that Aristotle mentioned, that Ayn Rand didn't, and I wonder if she would even support this, is the only one I was really not sure about, was temperance. Do you think there's a place for that in objectivist ethics?
Well, how do you understand temperance?
For me, I mean, growing up Catholic, a temperance was, being very careful how much of something you got. And I'm not sure that there is, maybe there is an objective limit on how much you should have of something, but I'm not certain.
Perhaps that's the more of the Christian implementation or understanding of that virtue.
Maybe.
And I haven't looked up any description of what Aristotle specifically means by that. But again, I think back to his idea that you have to do everything in the right way at the right time.
Yes, that's why I thought of temperance.
Yeah. So temperance seems to me, I would understand. I mean, maybe I'm wrong because I haven't looked it up recently, but I would think that that was his understanding of temperance.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think he's right. I think you can't, that you can take the principles, you can take all the principles of the objectivist ethics and know the abstract principles, but then you have to figure out, you have to have what he called phronesis, or practical wisdom about how to implement those virtues in any particular situation. Just like we were talking earlier about being honest. Does that mean being honest and saying outright what you think in every situation? Or does that mean considering, well, what are your long-term goals and what are your purposes and what are your other values that you're trying to achieve in a particular situation? Is it necessary to always say everything you're thinking? So that would be a matter of phronesis or practical wisdom or temperance of how you implement ideas. So
that's a great example of temperance. I mean,
it might be really aggravating to sit there and have to listen to somebody saying something that you disagree with, but then you ask yourself, well, do I want to engage with this person? Do I have the time to do it? And what do I want to trade with this person? Is it going to interfere with that trade? So. And how important is it to argue about that idea?
See, I find that most people look at exchanges with other people in the wrong way. It's something that I want to address because people have an agenda going into everything. And I find actually when you drop that agenda and assume, I guess benevolently, that everyone has some little bit of knowledge to offer you, and you just hear them out, I find that I learn so much when I talk to just about anybody. There's really not a person I've ever had an interaction with that I haven't learned something from.
It's funny that you bring that up because that's one of the principles of the kind of seminar that I run, which is that if you're trying to understand some material together, you're going to each use your own reason and come up with your understanding, and we can learn so much from each other about perspectives or ways of thinking about whatever we're studying together that maybe we didn't each think of. So if we have 10 people in the seminar, I get to hear, if they're using their reason on the text, I get to hear 10 different ways in which they're interpreting it, and I can learn things from that. So it kind of goes along with the idea.
Yeah, well, I learned a heck of a lot from you today, Marsha, and hopefully we'll be able to have you back on the show eventually here. We would I would love it if you'd send me some links about your seminars or anything else you're doing so I can keep my audience updated on what you're doing in case they want to check you out more or
I'd
visit
love
your
that.
seminars. So remember, guys, knowledge is not for all men, but for those who seek it. So keep seeking.
All right. Thank you.